Welcome to Immigration and Mobility Decoded, a podcast about business immigration and global mobility. Today is Tuesday, March 7th, and this is the first episode of our podcast. And joining me today and on all future episodes is Finn. Finn, thanks so much for hopping on today. We have a great episode ahead for our listeners with our big conversation with Envoy Global CEO and President, Richard Burke. But before we get into that conversation, I just want to, just kind of bring our listeners into the fold on some important immigration news that's come out lately. What do you have for us?
Yeah, we've had some exciting updates on the immigration front. Some recent news about the Biden administration State Department bringing back stateside visa processing for H-1Bs sometime later this summer. Just yesterday, the day before, I think, it was announced that USCIS is going to expand premium processing for certain F1 OPT and STEM OPT applicants. So a lot of great stuff, but more excitingly for Envoy, Bloomberg and a few other outlets are releasing articles today on Envoy's 2023 Immigration Trends Report. We're going to dive more into the report in our interview with Dick in a few minutes here, but definitely excited to see the coverage on that.
Totally. And for those who are, wherever you're listening or watching, the link to view the full report will be made available in the description or show notes. So definitely recommend checking that out and going through it. It's very, very insightful, a lot of interesting statistics and important other important stats that could help companies benchmark themselves against their industry peers. And yeah, Finn, echoing what you said, a lot of big important news coming out lately. As you mentioned, that the expansion of premium processing to certain F1 is super interesting. That came out evening of Monday, March 6th. And yeah, it means H-1B cap season. We're in the middle of it. That opened up on March 1st. And Finn, what are you hearing in terms of the expected number of registrations? I think last year USCIS received something like 483,000 electronic registration submissions. What are you hearing in terms of what they're expecting this year?
Yeah, so according to Envoy's Immigration Trend Survey, it looks like the number of registrations should be the same, if not more, than last year. And that's despite, some of the big name tech layoffs and hiring freezes of the last 6 to 12 months. There's also been some reporting from industry insiders that think that the numbers are going to be, again, the same, if not higher. So we'll find out more in the next week or two here when USCIS releases the total numbers of H-1B registrations. And I know we'll be tracking that, Eric.
Yeah, definitely. It's just super interesting to hear that, despite the larger news regarding the economy and the job market, as you mentioned, the layoffs particularly hitting the tech industry, that demand for foreign talent to fill those open roles, those high-skilled open roles, it's still there. And the one interesting statistic, not to share too much of the report in this intro, because we definitely want everyone to check it out. But there was one question I found super interesting was if USCIS were to increase the H-1B electronic registration fee, it's currently $10. If they were to increase that to $215, employers would still submit the same, if not more, registrations. Finn, what do you make of that?
Yeah, Dick talks about it a little bit more in our conversation, but it seems like companies have just accepted the fact that in certain areas, the government's always going to put up more obstacles between them and the foreign talent that they want to sponsor and hire and bring here on a visa to work for them. But regardless, companies are still going to just take those barriers in stride. And the demand for foreign talent is so high that those barriers don't seem to matter that much. That's definitely one of the more eye-popping stats from the report. and just super excited for the audience to hear Dick share the rest.
Totally. Well, I think that would be a good spot to wrap up this intro and segue into our conversation with Richard Burke. So Finn, super excited for everyone to hear that conversation. Again, the link to view the 2023 Immigration Trends Report is in the description, as well as the show notes, depending on where you are listening or watching. Stay tuned for future episodes. And now our conversation with Richard Burke, CEO and President of Envoy Global. And now I'd like to welcome our first guest to our show, Immigration and Mobility Decoded, Richard Burke, CEO and President of Envoy Global. Richard, or DB, thank you so much for joining us today.
But thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Delighted to be here and honored to do the first one. So thanks so much.
Totally. As Finn said in our podcast teaser, the flagship episode,
the pilot, the premiere.
Exactly. DB, we have a super exciting conversation that ahead of us. But I think to introduce yourself to our audience, just want to have some fun to start things off. As a fellow lifelong Chicagoan, I hear you are a Cubs fan. I am a Southsider at heart, a big White Sox fan. Cubs have obviously, kind of fallen off a little bit since the World Series.
Kind of.
What's your outlook? What's your outlook on 2023?
Well, I like the Cubs. I'm not a Sox hater, but I'll tell you, I still don't understand what happened to the Cubs. We had so many good guys below the age of 25, and what happened, particularly when you compare us to the Astros, who were the same situation, and the Astros kept reloading, thoughtfully getting rid of some folks, and we just totally fell apart. It just kills me. Obviously more reason to be excited this year than the last few years, but it still feels, and who am I to say, but it feels still a little bit stopgappy, ad hoc.
Mm-hmm.
There was a great article in the paper suggesting that, the paid attendance, which is only a portion of the team's revenues, went down so dramatically that the front office said, hey, listen, we got to have something a bit more competitive. And that's what really explains the signing of all these guys this past year. We'll see. I don't know. I love Chicago, and it was just so fun. 3, 4, 5 years ago, the Bears were decent. The Hawks were unbelievable. The Cubs were really good. And the Sox, as usual, stunk. But
except for 21, but they've fallen off since then.
Yeah, fair enough. So we'll see. I always hopeful. You got to be hopeful as a Cubs fan, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you got to be.
I mean, I always enjoy going to a Cubs game, especially since they've done all the renovations.
So
Wrigleyville's always a good time. A super exciting atmosphere. You can never go wrong.
I love it. My brother-in-law is a huge Cubs fan, so I get to go with him a lot. We take our ride scooters up there. It is the greatest time in the world. I just wish the baseball were better.
I agree. Yeah, it's Chicago sports is in a weird flux. We got the Cubs. The Blackhawks just lost Patrick Kane, just traded him away. Bears are the Bears. I mean, we do have Justin Fields, so fingers crossed there. What do you think? Are they moving to Arlington Heights, or what do you think?
That's another really interesting one. I'll say yes. What do I know? I just wish if they went to Arlington Heights, I just wish you see what great teams do. They have great ownership and that creates great management, which creates a great organization. And I just, with all respect for the McCaskey family, I think it's time to bring in someone with deeper pockets. Yeah. We're the third biggest city, and we are consistently a lousy team, even in a salary cap era. And other teams are consistently good. I would tie, if it were my vote, I would tie any municipal dollars, any government dollars to bring in a new ownership, because otherwise I just fear it's going to be squandered. I hate to say.
I agree. I agree. I was watching a video last night about their potential move, and the McCaskey. A lot of their money is the Bears, whereas these other owners. Actually, bringing the Patriots here because Finn is from the East Coast, a big Patriots fan. Robert Kraft.
We got that razor money over here in
England. Oh God!
So they get their money from elsewhere, able to build fancy stadiums. I think the Patriots even own their own airplane to fly around on. Yeah. So they have it all. But DB, I'm also, in relation to Chicago and Finn, feel free to voice your opinions too. But pizza is, near and dear to our hearts.
Yes, sir.
We got our deep dish. We have our tavern style, our squares. But then there's also, the big battle with New York and New York style pizza. I just want to hear from you, DB. What's your favorite pizza style?
I will tell you my favorite, and I'll also tell you the right answer. And the truth is they're one and the same. The right answer is tavern.
There you go.
A nice thin crust tavern. I prefer corn forward crust like you get at Paisanos or at Lou Malnati's.
Yep.
I like a nice sausage, onion, black olive. I am generally anti pepperoni.
Oh,
and that's the right answer. I love a delicious Neapolitan. The problem with Neapolitan is it doesn't travel well. You got to eat it on site.
Right.
I've never been to Spaccanapoli in Chicago.
Love it.
Fantastic Neapolitan. I don't like deep dish. And I'll eat a wedge, but I prefer tavern.
Yeah.
And now you know the right answer, so you don't even have to ask. Subsequent guests can be spared that question because now you know.
I agree. Tavern style, you can never go wrong with tavern style. Have you been to Vito and Nick's?
No. Where's that?
It's far south side.
Oh, I have been there. On like 80, in the 70s on Western. Yes, I have.
Yeah.
And I had a few Miller High Lifes when I was in there. Yes. I have. Very good. Very good. Yeah.
Yeah, if anyone's listening and you're in the Chicago area, highly, highly, highly recommend Vito and Nick's. Probably the best thin crust tavern style in the city that you'll ever have.
Lots of Sox fans down there, so be careful.
This is true.
Just like the Cubs and the Sox, you guys are both off base on this one. The best pizza clearly in my native region of New England in New Haven, Connecticut. It's not even close. New York and Chicago are second tier behind New Haven.
I've had New Haven. What's the famous one in New Haven?
There's a couple. The whole city is just riddled with
but the famous
spots.
one near Yale. I can't remember the name of it. Anyway,
Fenn, you'll just have to take us there when we come out and visit.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go. You guys can see some winning sports teams too.
Speaking of watching stuff, DB, what are you watching? Movie or TV series?
I've fallen into a TV cycle. Getting through a 2.5 hour movie or some of these enormous 3 hour ones, it's just too much. And it's not that I'm that busy, but I'm preferring TV shows. My wife and I finally watched Better Call Saul. Loved that. That was really fun. So that's what I've been doing. I like the English murder mysteries. I'm not a huge fan of the sci-fi fantasy stuff, which there's so much of that now.
Yeah. I think
How
the big
you?
one.
What are you?
Currently, the big one is The Last of Us on HBO.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And season 3 of The Mandalorian just premiered last night, so I watched that one, and that was great.
The first time I saw The Mandalorian, I couldn't believe it was a TV show. I mean, the production values, it's like, holy cow.
It's great.
Very
it's
good.
Great. It's great. As a huge Star Wars fan growing up, that there wasn't, there was that lull in terms of content, and so now it's just kind of the golden age, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I think it is. It'll be interesting to see. A lot of people are speculating that the streamers need to cut costs, which maybe is a segue into what's going on in the world of technology.
Yeah.
That golden age for production is going to start thinning off. I hope not, because it sure is fun.
Yeah. Speaking of technology, as I mentioned at the start, you are the CEO and president of Envoy Global, an immigration services provider that does offer a pretty robust immigration tech platform for companies. Can you tell us a little bit more about Envoy Global,
Sure.
the services, and the platform that the company provides?
Love it. Yeah. So Envoy Global, based in Chicago, we're celebrating our 25th year this year, which is good and fun. And what we do is we try to simplify and expedite the immigration process. employment-based immigration process. And we do that helping employers navigate the system globally. Historically, the business was a bit more focused on U.S. Now we do an enormous amount of non-U.S. work for reasons that will get apparent when we walk through the survey. But our thesis is that we are in the business of providing terrific service, born of experience, empathic throughout, highly proactive and strategic. And what's noteworthy about Envoy, Eric, is that we use technology. We think technology can augment that service delivery, never, ever, ever replaces it. But when you think about immigration, it's all federal law due to the concept of preemption. It is form, data, process heavy, and certain elements render very well to technology, form preparation, etc., compliance, reporting, security. And in relying on technology for that, what it does is it frees up the attorney to provide the real value add, whether that is strategizing, consulting, hand-holding, all those things. We think that yields the best outcome. So what Envoy does, we provide the technology, we partner with the best lawyers, and we deliver service to over probably about 1,200 employers, ranging from Fortune 50 companies all the way to promising startups. Common thread is a need for STEM talent, which we'll get into today, I suspect. But all sorts of industries, all sorts of geographies, with a real increase in U.S. companies frustrated by the process in the United States, sending people overseas. So I hope we can get into that today.
Totally. Curious, I notice a background portrait behind you. Are you currently in the office? And what's who's that gentleman behind you?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks, Fred. I am in the office, and I can't tell if you can see a glare. And when we moved in, I was trying to find a way to capture. I wanted our office to reflect our culture and our product. And our product is simple, straightforward, predictable, coherent. And so I wanted the office to be that. So lots of right angles, lots of clarity. I wanted our culture to be transparent, non-hierarchical, so we don't have private offices. We don't have frosted, we don't have a lot of solid walls. And then I wanted a way to capture this awesome mission we have, which is all about helping people lead the most fulfilling lives they can, Eric. And I tried to think of it, and inevitably when people think immigration, or you look at a website for an immigration firm, you see some cheesy picture of the flag or the Statue of Liberty or a passport. It's just so trite and predictable. And I was trying to think, how can I capture this awesome mission we have? And I'm old enough to remember these old Benetton ads. And Benetton ran these great ads called the United Colors of Benetton, where they had people as paler than me, which is sort of hard to believe, as dark, on the other hand, as Finn's shirt, all and everything in between, wearing these cool clothes. I said, that could be it. Maybe I could get pictures of folks we've actually helped and get them looking confident and assured and ready to take on the world and ready to make the most of their abilities. And then I reached out to this famous photographer named Sandro Miller, who's an amazing, one of the, frankly, most recognized portrait photographers in the United States. Sandro Miller, unbelievable. And I said what I wanted to do. He said, I love it. I believe in immigration. I want to help. So we found foreign nationals who actually had worked for it and said, hey, listen, we'd love to take your picture and celebrate you in our office. So we've got about 30 folks. This gentleman behind us was a Spaniard who was an architect, and I got to meet all of them. And then we also filmed them telling their stories about immigration. And the stories they told us 8 years ago, Eric, are a lot of the same stories you see in the survey results I want to walk you through. The challenge of immigration, the lack of transparency in immigration, the fear of having to be sent home, the lack of options. What they told us in these videos was amazing. And sadly, notwithstanding all the change in the last 5-6 years, these same issues persist, and we'll walk through those. But thanks for noticing the pictures. I love them.
Thank you for sharing the background details on that. It's an awesome photo. How many are around the office?
I think we got about 25 or 30, and they are, one thing interesting, all ethnicities, genders, orientations. The tough one was getting age, because most people who immigrate do it before the age of 50. So I really wanted to get, now obviously, there's people here in the States who are 70, 80, 90 years old who immigrated, but Envoy wasn't around. We've only been around for 25 years, but we've got about 25 or 30 different folks from every jurisdiction you can imagine.
Nice. You mentioned Envoy's been around for 25 years. How long have you been CEO?
So I joined 8 years ago, right at the beginning of 2015. And before that, I started out as a lawyer, and I love the idea of lawyering, of helping people. And I love the creativity and the best of lawyering. I was trained that the best lawyers are solution providers.
Mm-hmm.
And to be a solution provider, you got to be so on top of it, so experienced, so smart, so creative, so clever. You got to be able to figure out solutions. And I love that. And I practiced for about 15 years, and then I went over to the tech side, and I was lucky to be an early employee at a company that became Cars.com and Apartments.com. And I ran two businesses there. The second one was apartments, which was a great time. And at our company, I saw firsthand the importance of immigrants. Mm-hmm. Eric, we had huge development teams, and I saw all the contributions they made, and I saw what an incredible hassle it was for them. It always stuck in my mind. And then we sold apartments. I heard about this, and we've really been on a journey these 8 years. It's been a great time. And the whole journey has been about improving service delivery by improving the experience level of our attorneys, improving our technology so that can be more of a force augmenter to that service delivery. And as we've done that, we have become attractive to more and more companies. So we've seen really great growth. We've been really lucky, knock on wood, and increasingly attractive to larger and larger companies. And when that happens, then you got to develop the capability to send people overseas. And we've built that out. So now we've got 50 people on this non-US team, many folks overseas. That team continues to grow, and we've got the ability now to send, file directly into Canada, Ireland, England, Singapore, et cetera. So it's really been a great time. We've gone from being the 16th biggest player in the space to the third or fourth, depending on how you count, doing that off LCA filings. And I love it. I'm not Native American. I love the mission. I love the folks I get to work with. I love building something. So I really enjoy it.
Awesome. That's a great story. Thank you so much. So DB, main topic of conversation with you today is your company's 2023 Immigration Trends Report. I believe it is the 8th iteration of it.
Right on.
But what other details can you tell us? Yeah.
Awesome. So again, thanks for having me on. So this is our 8th. This year we reached out to 500 HR professionals, a little over 500 HR professionals across the country. We did it with Synth, third party, so it's extra careful, extra reliable. And we focused on increasingly larger and larger companies to reflect the evolution in the size of the standard Envoy client. They've gotten bigger and bigger. And the great news is we get a very representative sample, very geographically diverse in terms of industry, skewing to larger and larger. And we lay that against the experiences we have every day serving 1,200 different clients, and you get a pretty holistic view of what's going on in the world of immigration. And also, as things are dynamic as they are now, Eric, get a sense of what's happening in the world of technology and the hiring of technology. So I've been really looking forward to seeing the results, and I'm psyched to share them with you because this is sort of an ongoing story, unfolding story.
Totally. And Finn, you have some additional info on the respondents of the survey. What can you tell us?
Yeah, I just gathered a few more notes on the background of the survey here. So it really offers a temperature check from the business community on how global economic factors are influencing foreign talent recruitment, U.S. immigration policies, global immigration trends, all that stuff we're going to ask you about, Dick. A little bit of background on who was surveyed here. I have a note that says a fourth of the folks who were surveyed are C-suite level HR executives. And the rest are folks with job titles like Global Mobility Manager, Immigration and Mobility Specialist, and other HR related roles who really specialize in corporate immigration and global mobility at the companies they work for. Respondents include HR professionals from companies of various sizes and from all sorts of industries, as Dick noted, including companies with 10 or 20 or fewer foreign national employees that they sponsor to companies with thousands of foreign national employees that they sponsor. So Dick, diving into the survey here, one topic that was top of mind for not just folks in the survey, but the country as a whole have been the tech layoffs. The layoffs, that have been focused mainly in the tech industry and in finance. And we wanted to ask you, what does this survey tell us about how macroeconomic trends like the layoffs and hiring freezes and everything else, how are those impacting foreign talent and the employers that rely on foreign talent?
Right. And that was the $64,000 question, Finn. Everyone's been reading about these layoffs every day, every week. There's articles in the paper and on the news. And the good news is that the survey results buttressed what we were seeing in other quarters, whether it's our own experience with our clients or in national articles. In particular, about 78% of companies put a hiring freeze in. And remember, this survey focused on companies that utilize immigration. So companies have a need for STEM talent, but not just exclusively technology companies. 78% had a hiring freeze. 52% eliminated foreign nationals in the last 12 months. So half of the companies had RIFs that extended all the way to foreign nationals. And, a lot of times companies will try to avoid having to terminate a foreign national because they know if they're on a visa, like an H-1B, they've got to leave the country in 60 days unless they can get an alternate job. So people for the best of reasons, try to avoid that. But now it's saying that half of these companies had RIFs that were so broad they had to lose foreign nationals. So that didn't come as a surprise. But on the other hand, what was interesting, and this speaks to I think the permanence and the profound need for STEM talent, at the same time, all these companies still expect to grow their foreign national communities in the near term, not to mention the mid and long terms. And that didn't come as a huge surprise. We know the STEM unemployment rate is under 2% in the country right now. And as a result, 87% of the folks we surveyed are currently recruiting and hiring foreign nationals. And almost 75% expect, this is one that most surprised me, almost 75% of companies expect to hire more in Q1 of this year than in Q1 of last year. Q1 of last year, companies were still hiring like gangbusters. None of these rifts had happened. And it was a real sign of optimism to me that the majority of these respondents, and they were in these questions were in the field just in January of 2023, that the large percentage thought they'd do more hiring of foreign nationals in Q1 of this year than last. So it reinforced what we knew. A lot of hiring freezes, a lot of rifts, but a real sense of optimism going forward.
Yeah, and DB, related to that, we've seen that there's been a reshuffle in talent. That's been a narrative that's been spread since the layoffs have happened. Now, I know on background that about a quarter of STEM talent in the U.S. is foreign-born. I think there's this think tank that did a study on that recently. What are you seeing anecdotally about where these companies who are rehiring foreign talent that's been laid off? What industries are they going to, do you think?
Sure, we are seeing that. Just last week, in fact, Finn, I was in New York talking to a client does prop trading, high frequency trading, some hedge fund work, and they view themselves as a beneficiary of what's going on because they said we are now able to get folks in New York who used to work at Meta or at Google, high-end development talent who are now knocking on our door. And so that is just a data point of one, but I think it's representative of a broader phenomena that folks are, diaspora is far too strong of a word, but there are folks saying, I love STEM, but I don't like the roller coaster ride of these big tech companies. Or I like when it's going up and not when it's coming down. So they are doing some are doing one of two things. They're either going to other industries, and we can track this by NAICS codes in the LCA filings of these companies, and we sort them by NAICS code, and we can see that certain other industries, manufacturing, for instance, retail, for instance, are seeing a pickup of some of these folks. And we're also, secondly, seeing folks leaving the big and either starting their own or joining smaller companies in a search for something a bit more entrepreneurial. perhaps the same amount of risk, but looking to get a little closer to the action and the ability to sit in the front seat. So those are two things we're seeing. We'll have to see how it shakes out.
Yeah, it's really interesting. In 2023, it's no surprise that every industry requires STEM talent, and foreign nationals make up a big portion of that. So
exactly.
Eric, I know you had another question. Do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, actually, DB, wanted to follow up on something. You mentioned it's not just like these big tech companies, Apple, Meta, Google, that employ STEM talent. What other companies, in your experience, hire talent, foreign national talent?
Well, we could start with an organization we talked about at the beginning, the Chicago Blackhawks. I mean, other than Kane, most of those guys are foreign, more seriously and at much higher numbers. What's Elevance, formerly known as Anthem? Are they a tech company? Are they an insurance company? Are they an insurance company that uses tech? It is. What's Nordstrom? Fantastic retailer. They're a retailer, but they're also a tech company. Goldman Sachs hires more developers than most tech companies. And so what's interesting is as the world digitizes and things advance, companies that you don't think of as tech companies have enormous tech departments and are really, really reliant on tech. There's a great article in the New York Times last few days, but with all these advances, ChatGPT and AI, why do we still need all these developers? And the reality is we're just scratching the surface with things that seem as out there as ChatGPT. And so I think the pervasive, profound need for this talent ain't going anywhere at all.
Right.
And if anything, it's just going to spread beyond pure hardcore tech companies to companies that we might have considered retailers or manufacturers or insurance companies or financial services, distribution companies across the board.
Yeah. Have you used ChatGPT personally?
I have not, but my sister's a high school teacher, and I'm like, you better be watching your kids because, the stuff it can do is unbelievable.
Yeah, no, totally. A big theme of this year's survey results seem to be the pivot that companies are making to moving foreign talent to countries outside of the U.S. for various reasons.
Yep.
I think at the start you mentioned it's been a while since the U.S. immigration system has seen any substantial change. And, we could go right now to the New York Times or Washington Post website and find a story about immigration legislation not moving anywhere, particularly in the last Congress. We look at this Congress, just looking at who controls which branch of the government, immigration legislation likely not on the table. So that's one reason. But can you unpack some of the findings around how and why companies seem to be pivoting for recruiting and hiring foreign talent elsewhere?
Yeah. And you're exactly right that more and more employers are looking at more and more jurisdictions. Let me give you a couple statistics that prove the point, and then tell you, I think, the two leading reasons. A lot of eights forthcoming. 81% of companies that we surveyed transferred folks overseas because of visa issues. 86% of companies hired folks overseas that were originally intended to be placed in the United States because of visa issues. 82% of employers had to move someone overseas because of visa issues. And 85% of companies expect to leverage remote work policies because of visa issues in the United States. Well, why is that? And there's two reasons come through loud and clear. And the really frustrating thing, frankly, is that these are not two new things. People have been talking about it forever, and nothing has really happened about either. One is a real imbalance between supply and demand. We have a 1.9% STEM unemployment rate. Even with all these tech, reductions going on, it's still south of 2%. Economists consider full employment somewhere between 3 and 4. There is this wild shortage of STEM talent in the United States. 80% of all grad students getting CS degrees in the United States, foreign born. And notwithstanding that, there is a finite number of green cards. There's a finite number of H-1Bs. There's a finite number of H-2Bs. There's a finite number of EB-3s. And as a result, there's just not enough to go around. And these numbers, as the world is digitized and the need for tech talent and STEM talent has become more profound, and by the way, as our country has aged, and by the way, as it becomes clear that U.S. college students, U.S.-born college students don't want to study STEM, that we don't have enough. Notwithstanding that, the numbers haven't budged at all. And the challenge is that these fundamental changes, like, for instance, increasing the number of visas available under the H-1B lottery, presently at 85,000, that cannot be done through executive action. That takes congressional action, which, makes it like a triple Lindy, right? It's just not gonna happen
right.
Anytime soon. So one is this profound imbalance. There's just not enough supply, and folks say that over and over. When we asked one question in the survey, what's the single thing you'd most want to change? It was add more supply. 47%. That was the leading thing, get more people. Number two was the difficulties in the process, that it takes too long, that it is not digitized, that it is too uncertain, that the hoops are too narrow and high up. We had a question, we said, okay, compare you, and these are very experienced global mobility folks who were asking, Eric, said compare U.S. policy to those of others. 87% said Canada was more favorable. 83% said the UK is more favorable. I got to look down. 78% said Ireland's more favorable. 79% said Singapore. These are all jurisdictions with English language, rule of law, well-educated populace. Singapore is tough because of time zone. Canada, UK, Ireland, manageable time zone difference. They're saying it's much easier, and there's not a reduced supply. So it's those two things. Not enough people, not enough slots, rather, and compared to the number of people needing that we need. And number two, challenges around digitization, around delay. One final point on this imbalance between supply and demand is so profound that when we asked in the survey, would you be willing to pay more? Enormous majority said, yes, I would be willing to pay more if I could do it. Would you pay more if you could get faster service? Absolutely, I'd be willing to pay more. So this, sometimes employers get criticized for saying, oh, you're bringing in cheap labor. Our survey, puts the lie to that. It's our employers, like all the other credible research out there, makes clear that employers will pay more and more to get this talent in. And that's when they can't, that's why they're going overseas.
Yeah. The stats you mentioned, particularly focused around Canada, are eye-popping to me. You mentioned 87% of your survey respondents view Canada as more favorable. And I was doing some research in the lead up to this conversation. And in your 2019 report, I think that was the first report where you asked a question about Canada, and employers were sending more talent to Canada because it was easier to do so. 2019, there was a different president.
Yeah.
What can you tell us just about the evolution and the change of the U.S. immigration system, 2019 compared to now? I mean, we have a new president, a Democrat, Joe Biden. 2019 it was Donald Trump. But it seems that more people view Canada favorably now, even more so than back then.
Yeah, no, you are exactly right. A couple stats: about 87% of folks believe the Biden administration is doing a decent job around employment-based immigration. However, only half, barely half, 51%, say it's gotten any easier. And so it almost suggests to me that it's sort of hard to reconcile those statistics. But what I think people are saying is these challenges are so profound in terms of the supply-demand imbalance and these structural impediments to an easy thing that Canada becomes more attractive. Now, why is there growth in Canada when you might argue, boy, the Trump administration should have made Canada even more attractive than the Biden administration? I think what's happened since 2019, the main thing is COVID. We've now become increasingly aware and comfortable with the idea of remote work and people working over distance. Finn and I are all in different spots right now, and it's almost as if we're sitting across the table from one another. And I think that COVID and remote work and distributed workforces have made clear that, well, God, Canada is closer than Toronto. I'm sitting in Chicago. Toronto's a 1 hour flight. San Francisco's a 4 hour flight. One time zone away is Toronto. Two time zones away is California. So I think that is the biggest thing, the advances in telecommunications and comfort with remote is what explains it. And I think it's also why people are saying, you know what, even with United States to London, a 6 hour time difference, I'm willing to eat that. I can manage that because I'll at least get someone. They'll understand English. They'll be well educated. They'll know U.S. rule of law. They'll take that trade. They don't want to take that trade. And so query the wisdom of our policies wherever you are on the political spectrum. Do we want to be sending these jobs overseas? We know that the country is getting to a net negative birth rate, that deaths are exceeding births. And who is going to be here to do the work and to pay for Social Security is what comes through, not so much a little bit in this survey, but also just in other research that others doing. So you always hope that folks will say, regardless of where you are on the spectrum, that the country's better off, having these folks work here and collect taxes from folks here.
Totally. You mentioned the birth rate, and can't forget the aging population, mass retirements from the baby boomer generation.
Right.
It's all just kind of coming together.
And be careful what you say about baby boomers.
I heard. Yeah.
Dick, you touched on it a little bit, and I want to pivot the conversation over to what the survey tells you and tells us about what the business community thinks of how the Biden administration is doing on employment-based immigration and just the current state of U.S. immigration policy in general. But just following up on this conversation first that you were having with Eric, I know in last year's immigration trends report that Envoy did, a pretty surprising stat that stuck out is that employers were looking not just to Canada, but to Mexico to relocate foreign talent that wasn't able to get a visa here. And I know you penned an op-ed in The Hill writing about that trend happening and the threat of that happening. What does this year's survey tell us? Is that trend continuing? We have the stats in front. It looks like Mexico is still number 2 or number 3 behind Canada for where companies are sending their foreign talent. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Well, you are exactly right. And again, it is a more receptive jurisdiction. It is close. It is same time zone. While English is not the predominant language, there is enough English-speaking people. There are good universities, and those are the ingredients that drive that. The North and South America and Central America have real advantages because of the time zone issue, and folks are willing to they take that over complete English fluency for high skilled and low skilled. So we don't see that changing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I saw a report, just on the trend of nearshoring. I saw a report the other day that Tesla's moving a big part of their business to Mexico.
Whatever they call it, a gigafactory to Mexico. Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So my next question, Fox News came out with a poll about a week ago, and one of the stats that stuck out to me is that it was a poll of registered American voters. 73% of those polled said they want to make immigration to the U.S. easier, which really stuck out. Now, the survey that Envoy did, was focused on employers specifically. Yeah. Can you tell us and unpack a little bit how employers are feeling about the current state of U.S. immigration policy?
Yeah, well, I saw that. Majority of folks want more immigration, and the problem is it gets swept up in these conversations about illegal immigration along the way. So what our employers are saying? Employers are saying they are generally pleased with the Biden's administration's treatment on employment-based. They feel, notwithstanding, they feel it's only a little bit better than under the Trump administration. They feel that the Department of Labor, the DOL, is the biggest source of the problem, more so than they feel about USCIS or the State Department. They say that they, out of their desire to sea change, to make things easier, to add more people, to get to digitization, to allow dependents and spouses, all the things that we all read about and talk about, they believe the executive branch through executive order should take the lead. They think that's going to be the most efficient and likely to succeed step. Think of everything the Trump administration was able to do without congressional approval. They dramatically changed the immigration system in the United States. And employers are saying to us they want to see the same done by this administration to address these two big problems, the supply-demand imbalance and the administrative hassles. They're saying they're willing to pay more fees because of how profound this need for talent is. They're saying they'd like more green cards to be issued. They'd like more H-1Bs to be issued. They're pretty evenly split on legislation that's come up the last couple of Congresses that would eliminate the per country cap on green cards. So right now, every country gets 6 or 7% of the available green cards. There's a finite number of those green cards. And you get countries like China and India with enormous populations, the most populous countries in the world, sending many, many folks to the United States because of the quality of their educational systems and the STEM talents these folks have. India and Chinese folks can wait 10, 15 years to get a green card, whereas someone from a less populous country can get through in a year or two. And so there's been some legislation out there to try to get rid of these per country caps and just have one line versus country specific lines. Folks are about 50-50 on that one. So I said a lot there, but boiled down, again, it's those two things. We want more availability to address supply demand. We want more ease. We are willing to pay for it.
Yeah, it's all very interesting. Eric, I'll hand it back to you. I know you had some more questions.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's super interesting, DB, that one of the numbers you cited, the exact figure is escaping me, but a majority or over half prefer that the executive branch or federal agencies implement the changes for the U.S. immigration system. I think that makes sense, but you've been an Envoy for eight years. You mentioned you joined in 2015, so this is now your third administration. President Obama, President Trump comes in. Everything the executive branch can do, the next president can immediately reverse. So from the employer side, it seems like with that, they would almost also have to navigate constantly changing regulations, memos coming out. Yeah. In your talks with the business community, how do you prepare them for that? Just knowing that there is that possibility that the next president can immediately reverse what the prior administration did. Yeah.
It's a very interesting dynamic. I call it, chaotic stasis. And what I mean by that, it's chaotic because every 4 years it can change, and it does change. The first thing that Biden did when he got into the Oval Office after inauguration was to rescind and unwind many of the executive orders of the prior administration. And I can bet you that if the next president is a Republican, there'll be the same thing. So that's the chaos. The stasis is because of nothing happens congressionally, which is what's required for the really big fundamental changes. We're sort of nibbling around the edges of immigration policy. So, your question was, how do we advise? We say you need someone really good in your corner who will keep you apprised. This is what we see coming down the pike. This is what smart employers are doing. These are some of the, the way that Envoy can act as an envoy, your guy to overseas matters. And it takes being plugged in, being thoughtful, being prepared, being open to data. And that's our most successful clients do exactly that, because let's say 2.5 years from now, if there's a DeSantis administration or a Haley administration or a Trump administration, there will be a profound change around the edges. And employers need to work with folks like Envoy or other good reputable counsel to be able to, to navigate that.
Totally. So with the survey, I think it probably some prior research. You guys, one of the main benefits of the survey is the readers can use it to kind of benchmark themselves with their industry peers and et cetera. Following these results, what adjustments, in your opinion, do you think companies are making as a result of the factors and the sentiments that were revealed in these survey findings?
Yeah, well, one of the most obvious ones, probably the most obvious, is what we've been talking about: the active utilization of other jurisdictions. Think of that list of countries I gave you: Canada, UK, Ireland, Singapore, EU. Utilization of those, that is one big one. The other one is for benchmarking is we ask a couple questions year after year after year. One of them is, when should I start sponsoring the green card process? And when we started this 8 years ago, the most common answer was at the 2 to 3 year mark. For the survey we just did in the field in January of 2023, the most interesting answer the last year was at 83% of respondents start the green card process in the first year. That is the highest we've ever seen, but it continues a trend. Almost every year we go out, a greater and greater percentage of companies are starting sooner. Related to that, on the topic of green cards, only about half implement a clawback. A clawback is the provision saying, hey, we're going to invest a substantial amount of money in you to get you a green card. And if you leave, we expect to get some of it back. About half the companies have that. Another area where we've seen some growth is the coverage of dependents. Green cards are not inexpensive things. 83% of companies are now saying that they will also sponsor the dependents. And why are they sponsoring so soon and sponsoring so many in the form of dependents? It's, again, the supply-demand imbalance. So the statistics all sort of come together to create this relatively clear, vivid image. It's like one of those pointillist paintings you see at the museum where you get real close. You're like, God, how do I reconcile these dots? And you step back and you see it. And they all sort of fit together. Profound labor shortage, complexity, willing to pay more, need expert advice. I wish there were more slots. Until there are more slots, we're going to send people overseas, and we're going to have as generous a program as we can have for those we can get, because the STEM unemployment rate is 1.9%.
Yeah, and Dick, related to that, it's March now. The H-1B cap lottery is underway. I saw one of the stats in the report is that there's a lot of companies that are looking, not just abroad to move foreign talent, but the other visa options besides the H-1B that are available. What does the survey tell you about that? What do you think employers are doing in reaction to that really low cap of 85,000 H-1Bs available each year?
Yeah, and we've exceeded the cap for how many years in a row. So smart employers are working with counsel, working with their provider like an Envoy, and sort of going through the alphabet and see what could be appealing. We asked this question exactly on this, and well over 50% are going to utilize Ls. Those are intercompany transfers across countries. TNs came out of the NAFTA treaty to help folks from Canada and Mexico. O's for people of unique, extraordinary ability. They are looking under every rock because they know the last few years you have a 1 in 3-ish chance to secure an H-1B. And again, you got this problem with this supply outnumbering demand, the demand outnumbering supply. And so they're looking at every option in the United States. And that's also, by the way, why they're looking at all these other foreign jurisdictions like we're talking about.
Well, Dick, this has been a really, really enlightening conversation. We don't want to have to keep you for too much longer, but want to give you the chance. Any final thoughts you want to share on Envoy, on the survey, on just what you see in the landscape for 2023?
Well, again, thanks for having me. I'm flattered to be on the premiere episode, and I'll be looking forward to other ones. I've probably set a low bar for hosts, only upward from here. I guess I'd leave folks with 2 or 3 thoughts just to rehash things. Tech companies struggled the second half of last year. They're expecting to bounce back. Remains this very pronounced shortage of talent. That's why the STEM unemployment rate is so low. They expect to hire more foreign national talent. If they can't get them in the United States, they're going to send them overseas. if they can get them in the United States, they're going to be aggressive in terms of what they pay for and when they start paying for things. And because of all the complexity, they're saying they need to work with someone like an Envoy who's been there and done that. And so, the closer I get to immigration, the more fascinating I find it as an issue, as a human rights issue, as a economics issue, as an innovation issue, as a demographic issue, as a geopolitical issue. And we hope that this survey sheds some light in some of those areas. So again, thanks again for letting me come on. Love to come back, and all the best with the future episodes.
Thanks so much, DB. It was a pleasure having you on, and we'll definitely have you back on a future episode.
Love it. Love it. Thanks, guys.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Immigration and Mobility Decoded. If you watched this video on YouTube and you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to the Envoy Global YouTube channel for more content like this. Otherwise, please follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, everyone.